Okay, I'm going to start that over again. This is Chief John Horch from the enforcement section of the Clark County Sheriff's Department, and we are going to record this section. So we'll record the chief's presentation, and then we will also be recording the question and answers afterwards. After which I will cut off the recording because we are not going to record our entire meeting. And so if you could please welcome the chief to our meeting. We really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and answer questions. Thank you for joining us at NAC.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just a couple administrative things. How long would you like my segment to go? Because I'd like to leave some questions. Usually the good stuff happens in questions. So how long would you like me to talk, or the whole time, including questions?
Well, let's see.
It's up to the group.
Your schedule basically, well, it says a half hour, but you can take longer if you need to.
Okay, I'll try to go quickly, and then and it's a very big topic we're talking about. So just out of curiosity, I'll introduce myself real quick. John Horch with the Sheriff's Office. I've been there 32 years. I started there in 1989, and I've done all the assignments you can think of. I got in my current role 2 years ago as the Chief Criminal Deputy, and I oversee all the enforcement branch. We have 3 branches there. I am familiar with NACC. I used to be involved with NACC quite a bit when I was a commander and a sergeant. Doug Ballou was the chair back then. I recognize some of the names, but on here and some of the faces, but it's been quite a few years. So, and you can invite me anytime you'd like, or if you're not getting involvement from some of the commanders. We talked about this the other day about the community involvement. Sometimes things go in cycles in any type of business, right? And so if you're not getting some of the involvement that you think you should be getting, let me know, and I can speak to the precinct commanders, and we can go from there. So I'm assuming everybody has heard about the police reform laws in the state of Washington that were passed this year, correct? At least have heard of it, but maybe not understand it all. Okay. Well, there was, they call them police reform laws. So there was basically 13 laws. Obviously, there's 50 to 100 laws that are passed every year in our process up in Olympia. 13 had particularly to do with law enforcement. But there's really a particular few that really affect law enforcement and that have been the talking points or controversy, so to speak. House Bill 1310, which has to do with probable cause and use of force, and House Bill 1054, which has to do with police tactics and what we can use and what we can't use in certain situations. So to give you just a little bit background, these laws were brought in, and you can read them. You can go online, and I can send you some of the links of some of the legislators in Washington felt that the police were abusive and racist, and they talk about this in some of the preambles that they use. And they used incidents, and we all saw some incidents last year around America, that they used some of these incidents and said, we're going to create a whole new set of rules in Washington based on a few incidences. It seems to be that was their jumping off point. And I'm not going to say that some of the incidents that we saw last year were correct. They were not good. People should be held accountable. But anytime you take one incident or two incidents and you create a whole legislative change, you have unintended consequences. And that's some of the things that we're feeling right now on that. And hopefully there will be some correction next year. But let me just talk about, first of all, this doesn't mean that we do not respond to calls anymore. Some people feel we do not respond to certain calls. That is not true. What we do when we get to the call is affected now. So that's one of the things that misnomers you'll hear around the state. This is one of the big problems of law enforcement agencies around Washington, including attorneys on both sides, prosecuting attorneys, defense attorneys, you name it, attorneys all over, can't seem to understand this legislation either. They interpret it differently. And who gets stuck with it is the frontline personnel get stuck with interpreting it, and they're the ones that are held liable. The judges aren't held liable, legislators aren't held liable, or prosecutors if there's a mistake. So that's the human factor in this. Our frontline personnel are trying to decipher. We give them the best guidance. that we can, and here's where we feel that they should be acting in this realm. But yet around the state, you'll have different agencies. One will not do anything, and one hasn't changed what they're doing at all. So it's a mixed up bag right now in Washington. That's one of the problems. I won't say agencies, but in Clark County, there's some agencies that will do something completely different than another one based on these laws. And these are good people. These are good administrators and good attorneys out there, and they still can't agree on what they should be doing. So you can see the conflict that we're having when we want to try to make things clear for a police officer when they go to a call. Let's try to make it as clear as we can. House Bill 1310 talks about use of force. The big change in that says we now have to have probable cause to use force on a person. So I don't know if people know what probable cause is, but that means that person, we believe, committed that crime. Okay. You see somebody walking down the street, and let's say you see somebody breaking into your neighbor's house. You give a full description, matches everything, the clothing, the height, the weight, and everything. And they run down the street. You saw them break in, you saw them come out with a TV. You call the police. The police arrive. They see the exact same description with a TV. We can arrest that person. We can use physical force. That's probable cause to arrest that person. Let's use the same scenario. You see someone around your neighbor's house. Most of us will call, wouldn't we? If we saw somebody, we should call 911. You see somebody you don't know, we should call and say, hey, we have a suspicious person. I think they went in the backyard, but I'm not sure. Then you see the front door is open maybe, and you think, okay, you tell the police, tell the 911 dispatcher, hey, the front door is open now. And you give a description. You see a blue hat and blue jeans, but you don't get a good look. But you see the person run down the street. And let's say 10 blocks away, we come into the area, and this is what happens a lot, and we get a partial description, a blue hat, blue jeans, but we don't know if a crime has been committed yet, do we? Because we sure suspect that a crime has been committed. Here's the change in the law. When we go up to that person, we say, stop, and they say, we're not stopping. We can't do anything to them. Can't touch them. In the past, in all other states, we can at least temporarily detain them and go, nope, you match the description somewhat. We have a burglary over here. We then would hold on to them, put them in the car, maybe bring them back, talk to the homeowner, look at the Ring camera, develop probable cause, and we either let them go because they're not the person, or we arrest them. So that's kind of a basic difference in what we can do and what we can't do. Let's take it to a simpler level. Your daughter, a 13-year-old daughter, runs away from home, and she's going through issues, okay? I'm picking on a daughter. I had daughters, okay? Could be a boy. A 13-year-old daughter runs away, and we find her in Ridgefield. And it's midnight, and she's hanging around some bad people, right? And we're like, well, she's reported as a runaway, but it's not a crime. But normally in the past, we would go up to her and go, hey, Jessica, you're coming with us. You're a reported runaway. We're going to take you home or take you to a group home. Can't touch her now. Can't use physical force. She gets to walk. Let me give you another one. Mental health person. You have a family member, and we've had family members who are going through maybe dementia or other mental health issues, and they're causing a problem at home, and they're becoming violent, but they haven't committed a crime, but you don't know what to do, and the police get called. Police can't touch them. They can't help them get to a hospital by using physical force. We call an ambulance. We let the ambulance personnel handle it. We don't get involved anymore because we're not allowed to use physical force unless there's probable cause to arrest on a crime. So that's the big one that has come up. And so the standard usually was reasonable suspicion. We could stop and temporarily detain somebody. You see it on police shows all the time. They stop them. They frisk them for weapons and say, hey, you need to hang on here. We talk to the witnesses. We decide to arrest or not arrest. We're having stolen vehicles now. If you're behind a stolen vehicle and you don't know if that's the person who stole the vehicle or not, we're not chasing them. We're not doing anything with it because we don't have probable cause to make an arrest. So I'm giving you some very brief examples of how House Bill 1310 has affected police work. You can get online, you can read around the state. They've had some major incidents, some shooting incidents where they didn't have probable cause and they had to let people go, and they had a tragedy later on that evening. Someone got shot, and then they go make an arrest. So that's kind of a basic outlay. The tactics that we use, 1054 talks about less lethal options and what we can use and what we can't use. And they want us to use less lethal options. We've heard of rubber bullets, tasers. Those are all good tools that we like using, because police officers, believe it or not, do not want to shoot people. It's a bad thing for everybody. It is a true fact. It is not good. We have to protect ourselves and protect other human lives. And sometimes we end up using our firearms, but that is a last resort. But we have other weapons we use. Well, they put a limit on some of that. They didn't make it clear on what we could use and what we can't use. So we're going through the language on that. So there's debates in Washington on whether they can use certain types of munitions or not, even though that they're less lethal. That's just a brief overview. I had some notes here. I want to say that one thing that police officers and law enforcement, we're not against some of the philosophy on some of the tactics that they want to change, not these two particular bills, but mental health aspect in law enforcement. Law enforcement has been put on, a burden has been put on us over the years of handling every single problem in the world. And we're human. We can only handle so much. And the mental health crisis has blown up in this country, especially in the Northwest. And when police officers, they're trying to limit the amount of police officer interaction with mental health subjects, which I think is great. The problem is we don't have a group of mental health workers. We don't have a program here. They're rare. There are some places that have them that can go out. If a person is suffering from a mental health crisis out in public and there's not a crime, it would be great to have a team go out there and deal with that and not have the police. Because it is true that sometimes when the police show up and they see a uniform and a gun and a badge, it escalates the situation. We don't want that either. So we're not against some of the philosophy of, hey, getting police less interaction, but there were some things that went too far. And we're trying to keep people safe. That's the problem, is that these affect your safety and our livability in our communities. We are working with legislators locally, and we are working with, there is a Washington state pushback on trying to change some of this language next year. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that they were very intent on when they put that probable cause statement in there, but that is the big issue that we're facing right now. Let me, if you don't mind me looking at some of my notes here. Mental health calls. So when you hear about these police reform laws, it's really a couple of them that really have hindered our ability to do what we have always done, and they're doing around in the other 49 states. Washington state has been unique on that. When I talk to other police officers around the country, they can't believe that we actually have such a law. It is true. I want to say another thing is that most police officers, I know that there are bad apples in every group. We have doctors and lawyers and teachers, and we've had bad apples everywhere. But most police officers want to keep themselves safe, the public safe, and do it in the least amount of force possible. Because anytime we use force, it causes stress on both people. So this notion, I think it's a false narrative that's been gone up in Olympia with certain legislators, not all, that the police are out there and this is what we look forward to do. And that is simply not true. But unfortunately, we see incidents and we see body cam videos around the country, and people question, well, why did they do this? And why did they do that? Some of them are justified and some of them are not. I can't explain some of the things that people do, and they should be held accountable for that. But changing an entire system, because we have 1 million contacts with police and people in the United States every day, and you don't hear about any issues whatsoever. So, it's a very, very low percentage that we have to use force. And usually it's when the person doesn't comply with something. You're investigating something, you ask them to remove their hands, you ask them to stand over here for officer safety reasons, and they don't comply, or they don't want to follow instructions. And it's for our safety and their safety. So that's kind of in a nutshell what's happened in Washington. And the other bad part about this is that when they was signed into law on April 25th of this year, these reform laws, the governor signed them in to go into effect 2 months later. Normally we have 1 year that laws go into effect. So we can redo our procedures. We can have training and whatnot. We had 2 months to try to figure these things out and try to help our frontline personnel. That was a very hard burden to do, and we're still working through it. So a lot of confusion out there still. Like I said, my hope is that with enough dialogue with the legislators to try to fix some of the language in there and listen to us and work with us, that there can be some changes next year. So that's it in a nutshell. Now, a lot of good questions are always asked about these things, and I can give other scenarios, but if a lot of people ask what they can do, how can they get involved? And there are different areas. One is to contact your local representatives, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. I talk to people on both sides of the aisle, and I talk to them about this issue. I try not to make it I wish it was a nonpartisan thing, but it seemed to have been. It should just be a safety issue. And I've talked to people on both sides, and I think some of the legislators have now looked back and said, crap, maybe we went too far, we're going to look at it. And I just want them to keep an open mind and have the dialogue to go on, so we can talk about this and try to move forward and keep everybody safe. So you can contact your legislators. You can say, hey, can you keep us informed? Because session goes in January 5th, I believe, and goes through April 25th. And I know that they're going to be discussing some of these possible changes. So you can show your support that way. So that's it in a nutshell. Can take any questions. Go ahead.
All right. You have the most terrible job in the world, and why you decided to do it is just beyond comprehension to those of us who aren't in law enforcement. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I cannot imagine going to work every day, worrying about your own safety and everybody else's. That being said, media being what it is, what we have watched as a public for the last 2 years are just a whole hell lot of people getting shot in the back. For God's sakes, Kevin Peterson was shot in the back. You knew where he lived. You knew what he'd done. You could have walked to his house and picked him up anytime, and you shot him. But okay, I had another thing. We saw something just the other day, and I don't know what this person should have done differently. Maybe in Ohio, a handicapped person, paraplegic, driving a car, I don't know why, but he was, and stopped. The police officers, it didn't matter. He must have said he was paraplegic 20 times and had called for help to his support people to bring a wheelchair because he can't get out of the car. So apparently obviously the officers didn't believe him, drug him out, threw him on the ground, pulled his arms behind his back, and cuffed him all up. And it's like 15 minutes, and somebody would have been there to help. But it seems to me that the gut and knee-jerk reaction isn't to wait and talk and use the skills they were trained with. The first thing everybody does is drag them out and throw them on the ground, cuff them up. I don't think it should take 2 months or 5 minutes to stop shooting people. I think that should have been where we started. And I'm sure that for law enforcement officers, I'm probably going to get run over in the night, but in any event, it just seems counter to what my children were trained with, because they were raised in Canada. And when you had a problem, you went to the Mounties, because that RCMP office was only a couple of blocks away. The kids knew these guys are going to help us if we have a problem. And there were a couple of times over the years that there were issues where I would come home and here's an RCMP guy and his dog sitting out on the porch with my kid, which was always wonderful because they brought her home and life was good. I want that back again. I want our kids to understand that law enforcement is there to enforce laws, not to blatantly discharge their weapons. And I don't know. I'm sorry, it's a rant. I apologize. But it is a situation. That's what we see. And so when our legislators are saying to us, yeah, we're going to do something about this, I'm sure that you have an awful lot of citizens who say, you know, that's a good thing. We don't want our neighbors and our family members or anybody else to be shot. It's a thing. Anyway, thank you, John, for listening.
Sure. Is there any questions?
I have a question. So basically, I'm more trying to focus on Clark County, unincorporated Vancouver. And the problem like we're having is basically we see what Vancouver police offer. And then when we try to go to the sheriffs and say, can we start a parking enforcement program? Can we do this? We're always hitting roadblocks, I guess, so to speak. And a lot of us are frustrated because it is the minor things like vandalism, which, you know, it's dollar-wise, it's low for each person. Parking not being enforced. And then when we call 311, it's cops are busier. I mean, the sheriffs are busier with something else. We're constantly being pushed off, like, you know, days, hours, you know, if a car is breaking the parking code, it's, well, see if it's there in 3 days and call us back. It's like, well, we did call you 3 days ago. We're calling you back on that. And we're not even getting to the sheriffs. And when we do get them, we can get some help. But what can we do to stop being told that so many of the things we're calling about are essentially petty, and to get some enforcement in our neighborhoods?
Well, we could be here a while talking about this, but in essence, what we have is we have a pie, right? And you have so many people and you have to divide this pie in priorities. So the sheriff's office, Clark County Sheriff's Office, has been the lowest funded sheriff's office in Washington State for the last 30 years. We're at 0.65 officers or deputies per 1,000.
How do we get you more pie?
Okay. The one thing that that has not happened, and our county government has not taken law and justice seriously and safety seriously enough to fund it. Now that opens up the door, and I'm not going to get into the politics of this, but to fund something costs money, right? Usually everything comes down to money in life, whatever you want to say. You want more mental health workers. Where do you get that? You have to raise taxes. You want more police officers. You want to have a parking. City of Vancouver is funded better than we are. That is a true fact.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, I'm so tired of the 0.65. And when I talk to a lot of people, they're outraged by it too. And we're willing to chip in because we're a big enough county. We should have more law enforcement. And then it would stop.
Don't change something unless enough people say something. That's a true. If you've been around and you've been involved in any politics, phone calls and emails come to a certain level and they go, okay. Now, that's one of the issues. It's a funding issue. You can't solve that overnight, but there needs to be a long range plan of where are we going to be at and what are we doing with the county and where do we want to be? We're as safe as we're willing to put up stuff. So, some of the people will say, well, I'm not going to raise taxes for any of this stuff. Okay, you can have that opinion, but they're not going to, like our parks suffered here a couple of years ago, our county parks, when they decided to take some of the fees. I think that brought in some more issues, even though it was a small fee. And I think it was a good gesture, but it did pay for enough. If you have to pay $2 or $3 to get into a county park, that actually helped keep some of the riffraff out of there, away from the families. So little things like that. And you know what? Nobody likes to pay any more taxes. I don't think, we know we all have to pay some, right? Everybody, but at what level do you want to pay? And where do you put the money? And is it being used wisely? So those are questions. It's unfortunate we can't have every program. And we have so many deputies out there that can go to only so many calls. And for officer safety, we have to have at least 2 or 3 on some of the calls. So
what about raising funds through parking enforcement? My neighborhood alone could sponsor 2 or 3 officers.
Are you talking about the deputies writing the citations?
Yeah, or like a division. I mean, a lot of neighborhoods, not just me, and especially now with these new cottage developments being done, you're going to have so much more parking enforcement issues. And the thing is, I had someone tell me the other night when they were parked 3 feet into the intersection, they're like, I'll take my chances. It's Saturday. And they were right. 4 of us called 311 and no one came. So it's kind of parking enforcement, I think, could be a revenue stream.
Well, you have to have people go out there and you have to have the means to do it. So I'm not disagreeing that some of these things, livability issues are not a problem. And they're only getting worse. You can see the crunch from Portland and along the I-5 corridor, some of the effects that we're feeling. And we only have so many resources to do it. The other thing is we're getting I forget who was talking, is it Mrs. Stanek? One of the things that the officers, they're human and they're getting burned out too. And we're losing people left and right. And that's the problem here is we're losing good people early and we can't keep up with our hiring. And we've changed our recruiting. We still have to hire qualified people. So you can't just hire a whole bunch just to fill it, because then you're putting a person out there making these judgment calls. And we're trying to hire the best people with the most life experience in these to handle these situations. So we're running into that issue as well, is we just can't keep up our staffing. And it's a volunteer thing. Police work, we were talking about it, it just came up a few minutes ago. People are looking at it going, why would I get into this?
That's exactly right.
And I understand it's a very noble profession, and it's not an easy answer, but we're trying to get good qualified people, and we're hitting that right now. I think Mrs. Allen, I know there's 2 questions here, so I'm also doing the chat box. I haven't done this, but if you guys need
Okay,
switching.
we're keeping track. Yeah, Malata's next.
Oh, no, Steve, Katie has this question on for quite a while.
In the case of a 14-year-old, can a social
Oh,
worker?
sorry. Katie?
I see the
You need to
question. Would you
unmute
like,
and ask
Okay,
your
you can
question.
read it.
want me to answer it?
Sorry, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, go ahead.
everybody
please.
can see it. So I suppose there are some social workers, when we have an issue right now, I think the average time was 1.5 hours to 2 hours if someone was available. So if the runaway doesn't want to go with them, I guess they can use force. They're not the police if they're going to plan on doing that. So there aren't we don't have a funded social worker group that we just hit a button that they come out. We would love it to take some of these issues away. So I'm reading these. I was just going to rate and salary to other areas. Hang on a sec. I think Mrs. Allen had a question, right?
Right.
Did it go away, or was it your hand was raised?
Hand raised.
Malata's hand is still raised. So Malata?
Katie's was first, though.
Okay,
Oh,
Katie, go ahead.
No, that was already answered. Thank you.
Okay. All righty. Question for you. Or 2. Because from what I'm seeing, the enforcement is being not only eroded from external sources like the legislature, but also from within, including the reserves are no longer available, including you do not go through the CALEA certification. There's no citizens advisory boards anymore, because those are the people that are basically the watchdogs for the community. They have their ears to the ground. So, and they would be your staunchest supporters, as some of us on this board know. And so I'm really wondering about many other things, but I am really, really concerned that because of the COVID-19, the erosion of staffing levels, the erosion of funds, there has not been any effort to partner with other agencies either. But I know that you were working on the CRMH issue for the mental health, but also the CJC for the abused children's problems. But this is, if we're going to talk about long range plans that would support the budgeting increases, I think they're a little bit overdue, but let's start on those now. How would we start on them?
Okay, there was 4 or 5 issues you mentioned there, and I know there's
Yes.
a amount of time. A couple things. We are CALIA accredited. It just went through. It was supposed to. I was going to go to the conference in November. We've never lost our CALIA accreditation.
Okay.
Okay. The reserves, if you guys heard, the reserves is kind of complex, but here's what it came down to. We had 13 reserves left. The legislation, the Criminal Justice Training Commission has changed the requirements for the training for reserve officers. We could not keep up that training. And it's basically, if you could do this, say this, the reserves were, yes, they were voluntary. It was a good program for many years, but the amount of training hours they required and the amount of time in the seat, so to speak, like a pilot, if they don't get that time and repetition, we already have issues training enough for our own deputies, and we couldn't keep up the reserves. So you're going to take a part-time person, a very part-time person, and expect them in this high liability area, and with all these new reform laws, to make these decisions when they're only coming out for 8 hours a month. And that became such a high liability that the sheriff decided you can't do that anymore. They've changed the too much training for them that we couldn't even train them if we wanted to. We have to have training officers to do that. So the state changed training requirements for deputies and to include reserves. So that's that in a nutshell. The other thing was the Citizen Advisory Board, right? Is that the third one?
Yes.
That is
Yes.
something that we needed to consider it and have it come back more. I'm not saying, I think that is a good program. The fourth one was the partnering with other agencies in COVID.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what you mean, but well, we do partner with other agencies. And not law enforcement agencies, but we do partner with Columbia Mental Health, the Crisis Wellness Center down that just opened up off of Lower River Road is a good program. The Lifeline Connections, we partner with them as well. So these are areas that we do because they do provide resources for us that have helped us. We just don't have enough. The county needs to figure out what is the long range plans, because we're budgeted. The sheriff's office gets a certain amount of money. That's what we get. And then we have to decide, how do we do that? How do we keep up the staffing? How do we keep up our technology? How do we keep up with the training? All these issues are within one set of money, and that's how we're funded. And same with Tony Golick's office. The PA's office is struggling too with keeping up with a limited amount of money at keeping up. And we haven't even touched on body cams if that comes up. So I tried to hit on those very quickly. I'm always available. You can email me or you can call me because these are topics I enjoy talking about and hearing from people and discussing. But I will say this, they're not easy topics. And so it takes a little while to have a discussion and go back and forth and understand it. So I don't have just a quick answer sometimes. Sometimes there's a lot more background on my end. And then there's sometimes I hear something from you guys that I think, okay, that's something that we can work on. So that's what we need to do, is we need to listen and then try to figure out what the priorities are and how to move forward. So I know it's a limited amount of time tonight, so I apologize for that.
Yeah. And the reason why I mentioned those is because of that 0.65 staffing problem that has been there forever.
Yep.
As mentioned before, but also because you have lost those reserves and others, maybe during the strategic plan, pre-planning, you can begin to start itemizing some of the things that you had lost, itemizing the problems with the budgeting to fill in those, because they filled a pretty good chunk of community response. So if they can start looking at it from the perspective that the budgeting right now as is not functional, but with all of this increased work that you have, and with all this increased need for the deputies that are actually quitting, but also you don't have the access to the Sheriff's Academy other than 3 people a year. and the local efforts did not go through. So I think that it's time to get more people mobilized to get that strategic plan on the way now, while you're still trying to figure out what to do in the 2 months that you've had this wonderful legislative House Bill number 1310. But also that we need to let the county know strategically as to what is going on from the community perspective.
You're right there, Ms. Allen. So the sheriff can beat the drum so much, right? And then
Exactly.
and that's a true fact. We need help. It's a true fact. We need help because
Exactly.
you know. And so you hit the nail on the head right there. I'm looking over. How does CCSO rate and salary to other areas?
Yes, thank you.
I would say it's comparatively speaking in other size. We can't compare to Vancouver. They don't do it, but we should. If you ask me, they get about 15% more. It would help if we had. It would be good if we get. We're not bad, but we're not the best either. I mean, so that's all contract negotiations with the unions and the county. But I do believe there are things of who we hire and who we promote are their main things. Our human resources are our biggest asset in law enforcement because we're dealing with humans and we have humans dealing with humans. So you got to hire the right people. And we're trying to hire people with some life experience. I'll just say this. I was hired at 21. That's a very young age, whether you've had a college degree or not. You don't have much life experience. So we're trying to find people 26, 27, 28 that have a little more life experience and can deal with people and talk with people, because that's what we do all day long is we talk with people and solve problems and try to make it safe for everybody. So is there another question, or I'm kind of getting on the time here.
I'll have one, but if I could just follow on to what you were just saying. Our understanding from at least the past couple of years was that recruiting has been an issue, not just because of competition from the city of Vancouver, but other agencies and especially the Washington State Patrol. Is that still an issue in terms of salary differential or working conditions?
It's tough. When I started, every generation seems to have different things that motivate them. If you read that, I mean, what motivates a younger generation did not motivate me to be in it. I didn't care what I got paid when I started. I just wanted to chase bad guys and put bad guys in jail and keep the community safe. That was it. I'd have done it for free. So other people having time off is a big thing. How much time off do they get? And so you have different reasons why people come. And we try to create at least a culture in the sheriff's office of autonomy, of letting deputies and sergeants make decisions out on the road and giving them the freedom and giving them that culture of they're allowed to make decisions and they should make decisions for the good of our citizens. If they make mistakes, then we look at it and we go from there. But we try to have that in our people and let them go out there and help people as best they can without always having to go, well, I got to make a phone call, or I have to do this, or I have to check with this person. We hired you with a brain. We expect you to use it. And we're limited. We're at 0.65. We're half of what other places are. So we have to use that resource more. So we have lost a few people. We've got quite a few people from Portland here this last year as lateral deputies, and they took a big pay cut to come over here. And I'll just be honest. They said, because everybody waves at us with all 5 fingers over here and not over in Portland, they don't. And they got tired of it. They got tired of it. They just took the beating over there, and they said, I'll get paid a third less to come over to here to Clark County, where people seem to enjoy us and people are happy that we're here. So different things motivate different people. So we're kind of we're trying to hire as fast as we can, but we have to be very careful. We still have to be selective. And so it's tough. And law enforcement goes sometimes as the economy goes. When the economy goes down for a few years in a row, we'll get more applicants. People are looking for more work. If the economy is doing well, it's a trend. You can see it about every 10 years. Then we don't have as many applicants. So that's another factor. So Was there another raised hand? Okay.
I had a question and Cheryl had a question.
Thank you. I was interested in something that we did seem to have funding for at one point and have lost it, and that's Neighbors on Watch. It's such a good program. It's really disappointing that we don't have it, but because I'm only going to get this one question, I'm going to make it a two-parter because I learned from a lot of. I also want to know what your personal opinion is about body cams and if that's helpful or if it isn't.
I'll tell you my personal and professional. Yes, I think they're great. Law enforcement wants them. So you can vote on them if it's on the ballot. If you read about it,
Yeah,
maybe worded it
exactly.
a little bit different, but you know, I can't tell you. We tested some back last year, and I'll just tell you one example. And they're just a tool. I want to tell people that because you've seen incidents with body cams, and people are still like, "Well, how did that happen with a body cam on?" Right? Whether it's the suspect or the police officer. So they're not the end all, but they do give a perspective, and they give us some. A lot of times, the defense attorney will, well, we're not going to plead guilty. Then they watch the body cam thing, and it's done.
Yeah.
So we save a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
The deputies that tested him said when they would contact a suspect, the suspect's attitude changed once they knew they were being recorded. And that's a great thing because you got better, faster
Yeah,
compliance,
I like that.
and no fight ensued. So,
Yeah.
and it's just a good recording, and you have it on there. We get a lot of false allegations still, and it takes so much time to investigate them, and time is money. And so if you have a recording, and it was a rudeness complaint, the deputy said X,
Sure.
Y, and Z to me. Well, let's pull the tape. We pulled the tape. Oh, they did, you know, and then
Yeah.
we go from there. Then the deputy gets disciplined. Or if they did say it, then we know the person, nope, they weren't telling the truth. So I'm all for them. Law enforcement's for them. I don't know anybody. They don't do everything that people want, but we do. But I do think they're a very good system, and I think it would help us greatly.
Good, thank you.
And
And do you
Cheryl,
know about the Neighbors on Watch program?
I'm sorry about that. I didn't hear
Do
you.
you know the Neighbors on Watch program?
You know, I haven't heard it for a long time, so I can check on that.
Okay,
And is there another question, another hand?
yeah, Cheryl had one, but I just wanted to insert a little clarification. My understanding was that the Neighbors on Watch, the name of the program was changed to Sheriff's Auxiliary about 2 years ago, I believe. And,
Those are two different programs.
okay,
Those are two different programs. Neighbors on Watch, from what Casey had told me, I've referred several phone calls to Casey, and basically they refer them to a sign company so they can get signage. But I don't know how much training or assistance they get. But I know that they can get signs for Neighbors on Watch, but I don't know if there's any type of a program to train anyone. I'd have to double check with Casey on what actually is available.
now we're talking about two different things though, Merrily.
Yeah.
There was a program that was called Neighbors on Watch, and
No.
and
You're
Roger and Judy's husband
That's not the same.
were participating in. Sorry?
Yeah, Sheriff's Auxiliary is not the same. Sheriff's Auxiliary are actual folks, and they aren't patrolling their own neighborhoods. They're patrolling all over. They're using them
Right.
for handicap parking offenses.
Exactly, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that's not really, it's kind of like apples and oranges. It's a different thing. It is a very good thing though. And I believe Sheriff's Auxiliary is still active.
I think there's a little confusion. Now, the Neighbors on Watch became the auxiliary. What you're talking about is Neighborhood Watch, which is the signage, which is what, I think that's where you guys are at.
Okay,
Neighborhood Watch is, if you want to develop a neighborhood watch, you have to have a neighborhood association. But Neighborhood Watch is where the signage comes in, but now did become the auxiliary. Steve's right.
oh, okay.
Right.
Sorry. But I do have a question still.
Yes.
Just for a little perspective, do you know what the number of officer involved shootings were last year and what they were this year?
You mean in Clark County?
Yep, since this is where we live.
Well, I wasn't sure if you meant nationally.
Oh, no, I mean, that's why I'm perspective. I mean,
Okay.
Portland's
So-
got 15 and we have 2.
Do you
I mean-
mean, so let me clarify a little further, Clark County Sheriff's Office or all of Clark County, including all agencies?
Clark County Sheriff's Office.
I know of 2.
Mhm. And that's kind of the kicker. I mean, they put these laws into effect and it's supposed to be statewide and it's not even, it's just not, things are
Both of
not.
those
taken
shootings
care
occurred
of.
before the, yeah, one was last October and one was in February.
That's what I thought. Okay. It just gives a little perspective as far as funding and the thought process that was lacking in the legislatures when they did this. It was a reactive as opposed to a proactive. That's it. A lot of
Malani, you
hesitation.
have
and
a
always-
question?
I don't
I'm
mind
sorry.
coming on any time you guys do this, particular questions or fielding them. I don't mind it at all. I like hearing these. Go ahead.
I just had a quick question, because you had mentioned that $2 to $3, for the parking fee at the parks, kept the riffraff away. No, they find other ways to get in. Even if you did not charge, they find, and or if you had somebody at the front there, they always find it. Because, speaking from the experience of the children's parade in Philida, when we have 7,000 people come through, we were very, very happy to have the reserves there. We also hired some security, but also it was great to have joined the forces for the parade and celebration of the community on July 4th in the Philida Park. And so it's those kinds of events that also bring attention and also gives you an opportunity to outreach. And of course, we cannot do that right now because of the COVID. But is there a possibility of having a Zoom educational seminar for the communities that would involve them, engage them, not necessarily empower them, but engage them in doing the right thing?
Okay, I think I understood it. I'm taking a few notes here, so that's all right.
Yeah, COVID complicates our meetings, it
Yes.
complicates our celebrations as well,
So
but also
Zoom,
the
Sheriff's
outreach.
Office Zoom meeting for like this, but on particular topics or to educate people?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because I think some of us on the neighborhood side, would very much like to involve some of the folks that had been involved during the 4th of July, but we haven't had one for 2 years.
Yes.
So we're getting a whole bunch of requests for information on certain things. And of course, the sheriff's office always had a booth there. So, and now they're missing it. But then also, I think some of the recruitment that you had that was quite successful was also at the park. So instead of the park, maybe we can substitute a Zoom and
Right,
call
I
it
wrote
the
that
Zoom park.
All right, I wrote that down.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Kirk had a question and that'll be the last one, I think.
Yeah, and John answered my question in person or down below in the chat thing. But John, Cascadia Technical Academy serves all the high schools in Clark County for career and technical education. And they do have a criminal justice program there that's done really well in preparing students to go into that field. Obviously, they're on the younger side, but they have graduates and all from previous times. So yeah, they're located on Burton Road, just east of, it's 122nd, I guess, Avenue. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, I got one more came in.
Yeah, Judy has a question.
Just a quick question. Wasn't there something called like Citizens Academy where people could receive some training for the police in different areas and got to learn about the program?
Yeah, we had it every year. almost every year, I think. And then I was actually teaching in March of, what was it, 20? And then the next week, everything got shut down, right? COVID. And then we had this second wave come in this year. So that's the only reason why. I think it's one of the best programs. My dad went through it 15 years ago. That was to keep him out of the house from my mom when he retired, but she didn't know that. All kidding aside, I think it's one of the best programs we do because we get different ages in there. Probably some of you have been there, and I love talking about those topics. But maybe, Ms. Allen brought up a good point. Maybe we could even do a Zoom one, even if it's an hour a week. And because I think they're 3 hours a night on a Wednesday, and I think that's kind of long. But I like to involve, no offense, but maybe a younger generation too, that can get on for an hour too, because we want to talk about these things. What are people thinking? And the dialogue is where both sides learn something, if you ask me.
Is there a plan to bring us that Citizens Academy back?
That has not been discussed. We've been hanging on for the last year and a half with everything that's been hit with us, the COVID issues and the prisoner issues with COVID and all the other stuff. So, but I'm writing that down and discussing that with my boss tomorrow, who is the sheriff.
Okay, well, thanks very much, John.
All right.
Time and
I appreciate it. Good hearing from everybody. Can't wait to join the next one.
Wow.
Just let me know when.
Okay.
Thank you. I will
All right.
end the recording now.
All right. Good night,
I
guys.
mean,
Night.
Thank
Good night.
you.